There are people who are there to help you. And, I think for parents as well, if a situation arises and that is discovered, remain calm. Don't freak out. We've seen it where parents go, absolutely, man, I'm going to take your phone, you're grounded, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's going to exaggerate the situation. I know it's an anger thing. I know it's an instant reaction
Well, it's
thing.
a fear thing. It's a fear thing.
It is.
Most people get angry because they're fearful or they're scared for their children. It's not because
absolutely.
or you're disappointed because, you thought that they knew better. And, you can have this conversation till you're blue in the face and it still happens. Welcome to Conversations with Kristi. I'm Kristi McVie, a former WA police officer, specialist child interviewer and child abuse detective. For years, I worked on the front lines investigating child sexual abuse, where I saw the risks, the patterns, and most importantly, the ways that we can protect our kids. Now I'm here to share that knowledge with you. This podcast is all about real conversations, giving parents, carers, and educators the tools to keep their kids safe, both in person and online. Through survivor stories, expert insights, and practical advice, we'll navigate these tough topics together so you feel informed, confident, and empowered. Because when we know better, we can do better, and our kids deserve nothing less. Content warning. Some topics and conversations can be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised as your mental health is important. Please refer to my website and the show notes for available support services. Hello and welcome back to the Conversations with Kristi podcast. I'm so grateful to the amazing Andy Briercliffe over in the UK for jumping on to have a conversation with me about, we have no idea where this chat's going to go today because Andy has such a wide range of expertise. I'll just quickly share a little bit about what I know about Andy. Andy and I are connected on LinkedIn. The cool thing about LinkedIn is that you meet so many people from many levels of expertise from all over the world, and it allows us to connect because we're all very passionate about protecting kids and keeping kids safe and all of the other, offshoot experiences that we have. So Andy's a global online harms consultant, and I'm not going to tell you what that in details because Andy's going to share that with us. But when I read Andy's bio, I was like, I have to have him on the podcast. So the cool thing is that the internet, as amazing as it can be, connecting me and Andy here today, we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's not so great about the internet, I think. And so thanks for being here, Andy, and thanks for jumping on. And I stuffed Andy around with the time. So been amazing.
Well, thank you for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure to be speaking to you from the other side of the world. As you say, the wonders of technology. We've got to love it. So Andy Briercliffe, as you say, global online harms consultant. And what that basically means is I have a really good understanding, in-depth knowledge, high-level knowledge of what's going on the internet. I'm going to say the internet like that, if I may, for the first part of it. So my focus is predominantly on all the online harms. So that's everything from hate and abuse, intimate image abuse, and terrorism, extremism, predominantly focused on child safety and everything to do with that. That's the umbrella sort of overview of it, because once we start breaking down all of that, then that's where we start going into all different sort of areas. But it's an absolute pleasure. And in fact, I'm just going to touch on something you said about LinkedIn, that, there's an awful lot of negativity, certainly towards social media. And, but this is a positivity of social media. If we class LinkedIn of social media, it does connect the world. It does connect like-minded professionals and individuals. We get to share the information and keep up to date with a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of positivity with tech. It's not all that bad.
Yeah, I agree with you. There has to be, I think there's a bit of a give and take with it. Like it can do all of this amazing stuff, but it can take a lot too. So we've got to have that connection with ourselves as well to know when it's not doing the right thing, like when it's not helpful for us or it's harming us. Sadly, a lot of the harms we see are to children because they're too young to be on there, some of them, and they're not getting the right supervision or education. So that's where people like myself and you come in to let parents and people know, hey, this is what's harming our kids. We need to put up that safety gap. Otherwise, it's going to continue to harm them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very, very complex and challenging landscape we work in, and I do think that a lot of people seem to think it's relatively easy. Well, let's just stop kids from seeing harmful content. But once you then break that down, is what is harmful content? And there's, in fact, the UK regulator Ofcom, they've identified 130 online harms, and that's an awful lot. And then you have to break all those down as well. And but we also have to take into account is what is, say, when we talk about hate and abuse, for instance, what actually is hate and abuse once we really break it down. I mean, certainly in all different countries, you have slang language as
Yeah.
well, for different regions. So one person could be really abusive to somebody else, but you might not realize it. And we sort of
Mm,
expect platforms to try and deal with that. Uh, and, are we saying that kids can see certain things on TV and film and things like that, where there's an awful lot of swearing and violence and sexual activity, but now we're saying they can't see it on
social
social,
media.
platforms. So I'm not saying there's, we should say, oh, let it be a free for all, not at all. But what how are we balancing this?
Yeah.
And what is violence even? You can switch on the news and see an awful lot of violence. But are we saying, well, they can't see graphic violence on the internet? So, yeah, it's finding this sort of balance, finding this understanding of it all, which is quite
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah, and you just hit the nail on the head with that. And I've never considered it, but I remember sneaking, like watching R-rated movies when I was a young teen, and my parents didn't know I was watching like late night movies that were only put on at late night because that's when they were allowed. And so I understand that. I think the dangers that we've got is that the real dangers we've got is around the algorithms, that once a child engages with one bit of content, it continues to give them that content, or it starts putting it more and more in front of them. And so that can be one of the dangers that we're dealing with. But in your position, I mean, you've worked with the government, you've worked with like regulatory boards, you've worked with platforms. What were you seeing that was coming up for you? What are you seeing out there?
Crikey. I mean, to be fair, there's so much. And
What are you worried
I
about?
don't know where to begin. I mean, certainly we have to be super attentive to the child sexual exploitation and abuse content. And even that actually is not as straightforward as we think. I mean, that is super concerning. Obviously, children's access to pornography, super concerning. Although, pornography, what are we classing as pornography per se? Are we saying graphic adult content compared to, dare I say, soft porn content? And what is soft porn, for instance? I asked this question the other day about what is sexy. This sounds ridiculous, but what is sexy? Is it someone posing in a way, or do they have to be wearing underwear, or do they have to be naked? Or, some people, this is going to sound weird, find feet sexy. So, it's a true fact. So, it's not as simple as that necessarily. And obviously, we see the rise of the, I'm going to call it the incel movement and the manosphere and things like that. So all of these are concerning, and they're all hot topics. Basically,
Mm,
we can't deal with these individually and siloed. They, as I say, they all have complications to them.
mm,
So how do we do it? And, you touched on something then about when you were younger. And the
mm.
thing is as well that when we go back way before the internet, young people did things they shouldn't have done. Now, that might have been obtaining cheeky little drinks of alcohol, underage, or smoking behind the bike sheds, or doing whatever. This happened way before the internet. So it is,
Yeah.
dare I say, ingrained into sort of growing up. And
Yeah.
they're going to do that on the internet as well. We've seen it. They try to bypass the age detection, bypass the age verification and all of that, go on sites they're not going to go on, which, yeah, is wrong. But, again, what we maybe should be asking them, why are you doing that? But it
Yeah.
is, as I say, this happened way before the internet. So,
Yeah.
it's historical as well.
It's part of child development is they're
Yeah.
curious, They are going to try things that, to see what it's about. I mean, everything that my own child has ever done is out of curiosity. And, because people are talking about it or because she heard about it or whatever. And I think that for me personally, I did delay social media access. I did delay things where I could, supervised where the delay wasn't obvious, or, some online gaming. I was supervised as best I could, put in parent controls, but also educated. So, I think this isn't just a one. In Australia, we've got the ban coming next year for social media platforms, which and so we've got kids out there. We've got kids out there that are saying, yes, we need this, because they really don't believe that social media is safe for young people. But then on the flip side of that, we've got kids who are saying, but I don't want it to be my generation. They're agreeing that we need this, but they don't want it to be them because they're already addicted or in there and using it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned this at the beginning about social media, and I mentioned LinkedIn. Social media is good. And I'm sure some people are going to go, oh, about that. But it is, it is good. There's so many benefits to it. As we say, it's brought the world closer together. It's connected people. It's, it's brought relationships together. People have met and got married out of it. You go on holiday, you don't have to send a postcard anymore. You can take a picture.
Yeah.
And it joins like-minded individuals. So it is good. And in fact, when we look at the actual wording of it, social media, what do we mean by social? All of that. And when we look at these platforms, the reason they are so big, right, and so popular is we as users have made it that because we enjoy it and we use it. So, there's this double-edged sword here. And now we're saying, oh, well, hang on a minute. And, it's the same for kids, as in they've grown up with this. This is their life. Again, huge amount of benefits for them. Yes, negatives for adults and for kids as well. So we have to try and find the balance. And, certainly in Australia and, other countries are talking about potential bans as well. We're already hearing how kids are going to avoid it, and it's been going on for years. I'd just like to point out that it's been going on for years.
Yeah,
Young
kids
people
know how to
have
get around
avoided.
stuff.
Yeah, I've seen them. Well, some of them have been a bit obvious, some of them not. I'll just change my date of birth.
Yeah.
And then they'll put their image up, and you're like, you're so not 28, I'll tell you. So they've been doing that for years as well. And yes, I know there are age verification systems and tools being proposed, but now we've got to roll those out across every conceivable platform in some way. That's a cost. The big tech, they could potentially afford these, but there are smaller platforms as well. Let's not forget about them. They have to do stuff as well, so it's not as easy, not as straightforward as we hope. And, it's all right, one country introducing it, but I gave this example, which was Australia introduces the under 16 ban. Okay, let's accept that. They are doing it. So if someone from another country comes over to Australia, family holiday, that person's under 16, can they access social media then?
Yeah.
In the country?
Well, I didn't even think about that, to be honest.
Yeah. So now they're away from all their friends and family and they want to connect back home with their mates. But so is it allowed? So would we therefore, oh, you're a visitor, you're going to be allowed, but you're a resident, you're not going to be allowed? And how are they going to block it? I don't know. It's an interesting question.
I don't know either. And initially when they were talking about the bans, I proposed, who's going to be the one who pays in the end? Like, not so much the young people. Is it the young people who are going to end up with a record, like a court charge, or it's like police are going to come out and say, you're on social media? Is it the parents who are going to be held accountable? Who was going to be held accountable? And since then, they've come out and said the social media platforms are going to be held accountable if people under 16 are on them. But again, and being an ex-police officer, legislation is only as good as when it's tested in court, and you don't really know how it's going to work until someone is charged with it. So it's interesting how it's going to work. But I think there's a lot of things that we haven't considered yet. There's a lot of issues, but I do know that the young people, especially, there's a lot of them that are saying we need something that's going to protect us because we're not protected online.
Absolutely. And I think another thing is, I don't know quite how it works over there, but, over here and in other countries, you're going to potentially have the situation where you can have a young person in a school who's now going to become sick. Great, happy, I can have social media, but their classmates can't have it. So how does that work? And that could lead to cyberbullying, maybe going, no, I've got it, you haven't,
Yeah.
and all of this.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right. There needs to be something, but I think one of the issues that we're facing is this blame game. We have to blame one group of people, as in tech. Let's just blame them for everything. Whereas I think it has to be across. I'm not going to use the word blame, but for us to do something, it has to be across the entire landscape, starting from education. We have to improve the education, not just to young people, not just to parents, but to adults. We have this focus like, we'll educate young people, we'll educate parents. Well, what about the rest of the adults? And an example I gave is, let's say 14-year-old Paul, I'm just picking your things at random here, has a 28-year-old uncle. And Paul goes round to uncle's house, not suggesting anything's going on there. And when Paul turns up, he goes, "Oh, uncle, can I go on your PlayStation?" And the uncle goes, "Yeah, fill your boots." Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the uncle is an adult. He's not had any
He's not
education.
restricted either.
Yeah, we need to push education to adults as well. And let's remember, adults, as much as they're victims in exactly the same way as young people are, they can be offenders as well. So we need to look at that. We need to look at how, certainly, yes, platforms are dealing with stuff across the board, not just big tech. We've seen instances on smaller tech platforms of all varying degrees of all sorts of stuff. For instance, we've seen stalking and harassment on fitness apps.
Yeah.
Right. And then we need to look at, say, how law enforcement do some great stuff. Could it be better? Potentially.
Yes.
And then we have to,
I'm going to say
go
yes,
across the landscape. Yeah, well, we're both law enforcement, ex-law enforcement, but they could. And, it has to be then, right, outcome. It can't always be an arrest, for instance. And certainly, are we going to go and arrest young people? No, we're not.
Well, we shouldn't be.
And
No.
judges and magistrates and people in that area, I think they need to be better educated as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Is arresting the best punishment? Are there other options we can do? So if let's say a parent sets up an account for their underage child, okay, we know that happens, okay, are they going to be arrested? Are they just going to have a little chat? Or should we introduce, I'm going to be a bit cautious here, but should we introduce fines? Or should we say, right, okay, you've done this, we're going to liaise with your internet service provider, and as a penalty, we're going to ban you from the internet at home for, say, a week. Right.
Could you imagine that?
Well, why not? It's a punishment, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
Whether it's doable or not, well, it should be doable.
I don't know. That's
we need
strange.
to think outside. We need to start thinking out the box a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the same, we can't just keep arresting people.
Yeah, no. And then, it's filling up the legal system. It's filling up the court system. It's filling up, there's better things we could be filling that court up with, especially when it comes to child exploitation, online child sexual abuse material, CSAM, and other really important things. But it's just, there's so many, a lot of people don't actually consider any of this. They're just like, ban them or not ban them, or, I hear so much. And I think the thing is that social media came about, or like platforms and like online gaming, everything has just evolved so fast that we haven't evolved enough to keep up. And our kids, they're the ones who are like, like my daughter is constantly teaching me stuff about this and like, you need to talk about this, and you need to, this is what's happening here. And I think, and the only reason that I can, she talks to me about it is because I never actually said you can't have this, or it was usually let's not do this yet, let's wait a little bit longer because XYZ. I never said no. It was like, no, not yet. And then we worked out a plan for when it was more appropriate and what not. So I think it's quite interesting, actually, because you've just made me think about something. I wonder whether, and I no disrespect to many people here, that I wonder whether the best educated young people are those children who are children of people who have worked in this environment. Potentially.
Yeah, because, I have a son and daughter, and when they were at school, they're grown up now, they had an online safety talk, and my son kept putting his hand up all the time with the answers. And the teacher actually was like, hang on a minute, you know far too much here. And, he had to say, well, actually, my dad does this.
Yeah.
So, the next time I went to the school, they did say, and then I ended up going to give a talk about it. So I wonder,
Me too.
jokingly enough,
Me too.
yeah, it happens, doesn't it? I hear about that all the time, but yeah, that we need to improve the education as well. And, you touched on CSAM there, actually, which it's not an annoyance over, but I think we need to change that as well, because CSAM, as you know, it's a massive breadth of stuff. It's not just always the worst of the worst, and the example I give is that there's images of, let's say, and I can be quite clear with this, naked pictures of Bart Simpson, and that can be classed as CSAM. Now,
Yeah.
some people share that out of humour for various reasons. There's other things that are shared out of lack of knowledge, humour, and reasons as well. So realistically, it's like, do we need to focus a little bit more on really the concerning stuff? And we also have something called CSEM, which is child sexual exploitation material. And when you actually look at the landscape, there's an awful lot of CSEM that is really concerning.
Yeah.
But because it doesn't fall under the CSAM category, it's therefore not reportable. But there's also a lot of what's considered CSAM, which, as I say, Bart Simpson, really? Seriously? If you do get sexual gratification from that, then I'm a little bit worried. But, so should we be looking at, I think we should be moving away from this CSAM and terminology. We should be saying CSEA content.
Yeah. I've
And
got something
we
to
need
add
to
to that.
realise what we've... Yeah, please
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, so like in my experience, and I'm sure you were in the same boat, when you arrested someone or you went through their devices and stuff like that, you'd have to go through all of the photos that were on there, and so we would get photos and we would be looking for category 1, 2, and 3 CSAM, or and and then I think there was like category 4 and 5, but they were like. But anyways, and like the last few that I went through before I was retired, there was pictures of and I'm sure they were Ukrainian or Russian children, and they're younger children dressed in lingerie, and they're in stuff and they're posing, but they're not naked, and and it was like I couldn't charge the person over it because it wasn't, it was literally like on the cusp, and it's just really difficult. So I think for all of the law enforcement worldwide, we don't have standard, it's not a standard for every country. It's just whatever country you're in, you either have this CSAM, CSEM, CSEA, that, and it depends on where you're at. Like, is it illegal in your country? And some countries, it's not illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm going to go onto platforms now, as I say, we like to blame tech. They have the same issue. They can see, these profiles and the content and stuff like that. And, they're not allowed to report dubious or concerning accounts because it doesn't fit into the CSAM category, for instance. Trust me, I've seen accounts where I'm like, this is crying out dodgy to me.
Yeah.
But as you say, just because I saw it a lot where people would have, 500,000 plus images of youngish looking children in swimwear.
Yeah.
For instance, and that's not illegal, but you've got to ask yourself,
it's
why?
Creepy. Yeah.
It's creepy and dodgy, but it's not illegal. And, I used to see a lot of this in platforms, and I hear a lot about it as well. It's not reportable, and platforms cannot report dubious or dodgy. It has to be, this is CSAM.
This is illegal or not.
One of the other, it has to tick the box and any of the other criteria for these offences as well. In fact, one of the things with regards to adult content, for instance, is that it has to be real life or perceived to be real life lack of consent, for want of a better word.
Right. Okay.
So when you're looking at it, it's like, how honestly can you determine whether there was consent or not consent to take part in that activity? I don't want to be too graphic, but for instance, rape.
Yeah.
One of the things is, it has to be rape.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I can't clearly tell you whether that was actual rape or not, and we have to realize, and we have to have these open conversations. People do have fantasies, stroke role play, stroke kinks about that.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at it, how are you to determine without any context that thing, that image, that video, whatever. And these are what content moderators and specialists have to try and figure out. So it's not even easy for platforms to try to determine stuff at times. So they're in,
It's not easy
the
for
tricky
law
situation.
enforcement either.
No.
Like trying to identify the people in these videos, these photos, or whatever sometimes it takes years to identify people.
Yeah. And now, obviously, we've got AI.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody's an AI expert all of a sudden. And as you say, with the creation of the AI images, now we've got law enforcement spending time potentially trying to find a victim that doesn't exist.
Potentially, yeah.
And that's an awful lot of hours doing that. Pre this, for instance, and I know many countries have this. We used to have these vigilante groups who used to, try to seek out paedophiles and offenders. And then again, law enforcement were then trying to find a victim, reading about this victim's going to meet, this person, this offender. And you suddenly realize, actually, no, this victim doesn't exist. So, we have an awful lot of time looking for things that
don't
don't
exist.
exist. That
Yeah.
doesn't help the situation. We really need to be spending our time, and law enforcement do. There's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes that people just don't realize.
Yeah.
And then law enforcement are up against it as well.
Well, the platform creators and the AI creators, it's like taking less and less energy to do it, right? So
Yeah.
it's quicker and easier to do it now than it was 6 months ago or 12 months ago or 2 years ago. And so law enforcement has to come up with ways to counteract that, but it's taking longer for them to keep up with what's happening than it must be frustrating. I'd imagine over here in Australia, we've got Task Force Argos and they do an amazing job in Australia, but I'd imagine they are pulling their hair out with this stuff.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's the same around the world. Even before all AI and everything like that, law enforcement was snowed under with stuff, and they have to prioritize. They're now having to prioritize all these online harms, not just child safety related stuff. If you're a victim of any of this, you want your case to be the most important. And unfortunately, law enforcement can't do that. There is a prioritization. So I'm not going to say things slip, but it's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they're having to deal with all this. And to be honest, I haven't actually seen or read, much expansion for law enforcement in this sort of area. Now we've got these acts coming in, whether Australia, UK, or even Europe. I haven't seen any publicity around we're now going to create a new cyber force or an online force, or we're now going to give police an extra $50 million or pounds solely to focus on this. We're going to increase, create 200 jobs solely to focus on this. I haven't seen it. Maybe they are doing it, but I haven't. I would have thought we'd have seen something about it.
There's no extra money, and it's private enterprise that's actually trying to help with this by creating AI technology detectors. But even they're struggling to detect what's AI these days. So the AI is getting so good that even the platforms programs that are designed to try and seek it out and identify it are struggling. So it's not looking good. It's not looking good for our previous cohort that work in this space. I just think my podcast is based around educating parents, and I think what we need to remember is that it seems really scary, but there is things we can do, right? There's stuff we can actually do. We've already touched on a few things, educating. Like, we both know how much educating our kids helped them through it. Like, they were smarter, they made smarter choices, they were quicker to come forward because we had an open and honest communication. I'd imagine that was the same for you. And they were less scammed and tricked into things because they knew what to watch out for. Would you be agreeing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you say, your podcast is mainly at parents. One of the things I would say is, you don't have to be intrusive to find out what your kids are doing. Just have a very open conversation and be aware. I did a talk to some parents ages ago, and I had images of the logos, top 15 logos of various platforms. I did it with the young people, I did it with the parents. And when I did it with the young people, they got about 12 out of the 15. When I did it with the parents, they got about 5.
Yeah.
And
they didn't know what their kids were using.
Exactly. And I was saying, look, you don't need to know the ins and outs of these platforms. That's a whole different conversation. What I was saying is, look, just to be aware of, if you see this logo on the screen, you know what that app is. That's all you
what it
need to know,
does.
really. Yeah, what it does, and just have a conversation of, is that a nice app? Is it a good app?
Yeah.
You don't have to go, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you on that? So that, that's a simple thing, just having some awareness. As you say, it's not all bad,
Yeah. Well, it's
just
not
having
all
those
bad
conversations.
if you fill in the gaps that comes with this, right? If you're all hands off and you just hand over a device and go, it's basically you're throwing your kid in a pool and expecting them to swim. That's pretty much what I liken it to. And the one thing that you mentioned about, having that, knowing what they're doing, I used to say things like, oh, what's this one do? Oh, show me how that works. And just be curious, because it's helpful if you start this when they're younger, because
Absolutely.
that kind of conversations continue as they become teenagers and it's less awkward. I mean, if your kids are teenagers, just start somewhere. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's really important that we just don't throw our kids in the pool and let them sink and swim,
Yeah, and I think it's important that, at the end of the day, kids, the young people, follow by example. So, for instance, if we're there, for instance, at the dinner table or wherever you eat, and we're there as parents, adults, just sitting on a phone, and the kids are on the phone and whatever, that's not really setting the best example. I appreciate we've got busy lives, and especially depending on the work we're doing, oh God, we've got to be on there and stuff like that. But, if you're going to say, right, your phone down for an hour whilst you at least have dinner, you as a parent should do exactly the same as well. Not saying, oh, well, mine's work, it's different. No,
it's not.
the thing is, well, I wouldn't say nothing is ever that urgent. Maybe a few things sometimes are, but they learn from example. And if you're just there scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, they pick up on it. So, we have to think about our actions and how we portray ourselves to the children as well.
My teen says to me, I'm more important than your phone when she wants to talk or when she wants me to do stuff with her. And I'm like, yep, you are. Put it down. And we have a rule, like no phones at the table. I think you can spend 20 minutes as long as you're just, and we still sit down like 5 nights out of 7 together at the table. We've got busy lives and teenage and stuff, but we still spend most nights at the table. Yeah, there's no phones at the table, and my daughter calls me out and says, I'm more important than your phone. Come and talk to me. So,
Yeah.
If that's the case, like, it's true. Like, I don't want her to ever think that anything's more important than her.
Yeah, and it's a really good point you made there that, if your child says something to you, listen, can I chat to you about this? Or even it's like, have you ever heard of an app, blah, blah, blah. Don't turn around and say, no, right, that's it, end of conversation. It's just like, oh, well, let's have a look at it together then maybe.
Yeah.
The other thing I was just going to point out there is we obviously have to touch on sextortion.
Yes.
It's a huge,
good point.
huge
Thank you
topic.
for bringing it up.
Yeah. And, I do see a lot of, how to tell or how to see the signs of your child struggling, and they're always on the phone, or they hide away in their bedroom. They spend hours on the phone. I'm not being funny. That's a typical teenager.
Yeah. This day.
It doesn't necessarily mean they're being groomed or sextorted. Okay.
No.
Let's have a realistic balance about that. Yes, there is, as a parent, your child, you know when something doesn't seem right, when they might be super quiet or maybe change, their character in some way. That's what you've got to look at, not if they're going in their room for 6 hours or being grumpy or type of thing. And again, it's having those conversations. Sextortion it is on the rise. It's been going on for years. It has become more, dare I say, efficient through the use of AI. And it is a serious concern. So it is super important to have the conversations with your children about, who are they talking to? Do they know the people they're talking to? As I say, you don't have to be intrusive. You don't have to, I'm going to take your phone off you to go through this. No, build that trust, build that communication, because even the child might not realize they're actually being groomed.
No.
Because grooming is actually normal conversation to begin with. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, you look lovely. Or how was school? Oh, what are you doing at the weekend? What music are you into? That's actually legal.
Yeah.
so they might not even realize, and especially if someone's pretending to be someone their own age, having that question, do you actually know who you're talking to? Can you vouch? Is it a friend from school? How did you get introduced? And, with that, we have to go on the flip side of that, which is that there is so much education for young people out there, whether it's in schools, it's online, it's helpful websites. Young people are still becoming victims for this.
Yeah,
So
all the time.
is the message not getting across? Are they not listening? Do they not want to listen? Why is it happening? As I say, with all this education and all this help out there,
I think,
need to think about
in
that.
in my experience, when I talk to young people about this stuff, and especially young males who have been sextorted, their explanation, and if they, like you said it right at the start, why are kids doing this behavior? And I always tend to ask is, what led you to like share nudes? No shame, no blame. I'm not pointing fingers here.
Yeah,
I'm just interested because it's an interesting thing that happens, like. And most of the kids say to me, "Oh, I was lonely." They sent it first. And this is a thing, like, I always say to young people, especially at any presentations I do, I'm like, okay, if you like, think about why. And when you notice that feeling, then go seek a friend, a real friend, not someone who is you've never met before, who's sending messages, making you feel good. Go and seek an actual human, because the people online, you just can never know if they're real. And, like you said at the very beginning, there is people who've met their life partners and they've met great friends and stuff. So there is goods and bads, but we need to help our kids identify, when I feel like this, I need to seek this help, because, and with regards to online and like sextortion and stuff, most of the time these kids it seems real, and this person biohacks their defense. They're late at night, they're in their room on their, they're feeling lonely, or the person sends them a nude first or a video first, and then it's kind of like a trust system. They've trusted me with it, so I've got to send something. So it's not their fault, they're victims.
Yeah, and I think it's super important as well that young people realise that there is, they are not the only people, they're not the only people who are either going through this or have gone through this. It's happened for years, as I've said. You're not alone. There are plenty of resources that you can reach out to just speak to people, whether you want to report it or speak to people. It doesn't have to be a teacher. It doesn't have to be your parent. It doesn't have to be whatever. A wide variety. So don't let it get to the stage where it gets a really bad situation. Reach out, have that conversation anonymously if you want. Obviously, people are there to help you. Yeah, I'm talking to the young people here. There are people who are there to help you. And, I think for parents as well, if a situation arises and that is discovered, remain calm. Don't freak out. We've seen it where parents go, absolutely, man, I'm going to take your phone, you're grounded, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That's going to exaggerate the situation. I know it's an anger thing. I know it's an instant reaction
Well,
thing.
it's a fear thing. It's a fear thing.
It is.
Most people get angry because they're fearful or they're scared for their children. It's not because
absolutely.
or you're disappointed because, you thought that they knew better. And, you can have this conversation till you're blue in the face and it still happens. And the thing is that we did stupid things, like you said at the start, and we just didn't have the social media or the iPhone, the camera to record this stuff. So I know. And we're all saying that, like, as parents who grew up without camera phones, we're all saying, thank God. So have some compassion for the kids who don't have that luxury. And, maybe just, have an action plan in place. But one of the things that I want parents to also know about this is don't wait till it happens. Have these conversations way before, before they hit high school or secondary school, because this stuff's getting younger and younger.
Absolutely. And, I think as well, just to do a range across the topics here, we've sort of focused on child safety and child sexual abuse material and stuff related to that. But it's other stuff as well. As I say, we've heard of people being stalked online and harassed and bullied online. And, we're seeing, as I say, the incel and the manosphere movement as well. And young people are buying dare I say, harmful items, whether that might be laughing gas or knives and things like that. So it is bigger than the child sexual exploitation landscape.
Yeah, good point.
So, if your child does receive a package, I'm not saying suddenly open it, but, you received a parcel today.
Where did you get that from? You don't have any money in your bank.
Well, exactly, and we've seen this where, young people are enticed by, oh, I'll send you the latest shoes, or I'll send you this, I'll send you that. Just be a little bit aware about what they might be buying, so as I say, it's across the landscape of all sorts of things. And, as I said,
I wanted to mention gambling as well, because we have a lot of gambling, kids gambling in Australia, which I didn't hear. I heard a report about that the other day, and I was like, whoa, that's not even something I would have considered.
Yeah, because it is so easy. Our lives now are instant. You don't have to type www.in and go and find a computer somewhere. You don't. It's instant on our phones at the moment. And again, that's like gambling. And in fact, actually, go on the flip side of that, food, right? Now you think, hang on, that's a bit weird, but it's so easy to order junk food, and that's not great for the health of the kids. It's so easy. So gambling, health food, all sorts of things. So gambling, as I say, as you just alluded to there, is a big issue. So what can we do about that? I do know
have conversations.
Have conversations. I know they are trying to introduce age verification in various ways. Whether it'll work, we shall see. But interestingly enough, the gambling landscape and the alcohol landscape are doing a lot more than the online landscape. I don't know what it's like over there, but certainly over here,
it is.
Crikey, the amount
warnings
of TV
everywhere.
Adverts, for drinking and gambling, it's all over the place. But yet, can't really say I ever see much.
Here's my opinion on social media and gaming and online gaming and stuff. I feel that they can do more. They can do better, because they've got these platforms set up with, and they can do things when they want to, and they're got us hogtied in that they only have to do so much, so they're only doing what they have to do. I think we can, they're not silly, and they know that they could set up age verification possibly if they could, or to have their AI components to go through and identify kids that are under 13 or whoever under 16. They could be doing that because it is a possibility. It is there. The tech is there. But I think they could be doing a little better for everyone, because I recently went on a podcast of a comedian, a dark humor comedian, and I've been told it was brave because I went on there to talk about child sexual abuse and child sexual abuse material, because he made a dark humor joke about pedophilia, and everyone was up in arms about it, right? And because it was a skit, he's a comedian, it was a skit, made it look like he was trying to basically poach a child. And so I went onto his podcast just to explain, why people probably got really upset with him, because it's not a joking matter for a lot of people. It's a real life situation that's happened to them, happened to their family members. And we were talking about it, and he goes, on YouTube, I can mark my content for 18 plus, and it only gets shown to 18 plus. I can't do that on Instagram. I can't do that on, Facebook or any other of these other places. When there's dangerous or inappropriate content on Instagram, there was a couple of weeks ago when they got rid of the moderators, that third-party moderation off Meta. All of these videos went through for a day or two where, you were seeing beheadings and you were seeing people dying and you were seeing all of this really catastrophic content. And he said, before you clicked on the video, in most of these videos, it said this video is whatever, giving a warning, harmful content, see why or watch video. He goes, I'd love to be able to put that in front of my videos, because then it would be because then you're choosing purposely to go to that video. And that he put that to me, and I said, he goes, why can't I put a tick box to say my content is for 18 plus?
Yeah.
And so it's pushed to 18 plus.
Yeah, the platforms can do a lot better. And I think, to be honestly, that they know they can do a lot better. appreciate it's a business model, and I appreciate it's not, as we touched on before, what's illegal in one country isn't illegal in another, and what is harmful content. Obviously beheadings are super, graphic, but they see it in films. So are they saying, well, hang on, you can see it in films, but you can't see it on this, and the human behavior is, if you see the box saying this may contain sensitive content, human behavior is, happy days.
Click.
I will see what that is. Thank you. So even, yes, it's a simple thing, and they can say we've put a content warning on it, but human behavior just overrules that. But, as I say as well, the tricky thing is that they can't action dubious or concerning activity as well. So can they do a lot more? Absolutely. And that does all sorts of things. Even their training, for staff, I think could be a lot better. How they tweet things could be a lot better. I mean, I've seen some of the age verification proposals that they want to put in. It's a good start, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But I think, if I'm brutally honest as well, and I just like to point out, I'm not here to be completely pro-tech. I'm just telling the facts of what it is. That I think any platform could turn around and go, we have put every conceivable safety measure in. We've employed 1,000 stuff. Like, I'm just picking figure out my head.
Yeah.
We've done age verification. We've done this. We've done that. They will still get a slap on the wrist, because guarantee, content will get through, or people say, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that?
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I mean, I got caught out with YouTube. I tried to block a couple of things on YouTube when my daughter saw porn for the first time, and I was like, she was only 10, and I put out, I did all this stuff, thought I'd done it out. I was still able to see bestiality on YouTube, and I thought everything was locked down. I just, I think the main thing is they're trying, but I think at the current environment we've got, there's like literally they've taken the handbrake off and they're just allowing whatever.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting place, but ultimately parents need to take some action. They need to be involved. They need to be in there talking to the kids, talking to them about this stuff.
We have to start somewhere, and the starting point has to be education. But I say the fix is right across the entire landscape. We're not just blaming parents, we're not blaming kids, we're not blaming tech.
Law of enforcement.
It has to be across it. Yeah, it has to be. It's a societal issue, and we have to deal with it in a societal way. Just going back to tech then, I tried to report some stuff, and I've heard it from other people. We've tried to report stuff on particular platforms. Complicated.
It is.
And that is a simple thing.
It always comes back as being not, it's not against guidelines when it's nudity or something. I'm like, come on.
Even if someone is let's say a victim of intimate image abuse, okay, and they report it, so they're already stressed, they're worked up, and that could be a young person, that could be an older person, an adult,
anyone.
You're waiting then, oh my god, this is the worst thing happened. Then you're waiting and it's going through the process, and then, as you say, you might get the thing, we have reviewed this and it has not violated a policy. Oh well, that's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's stressful.
Yeah, and that can have a mental health impact on people as well. So, yes, platforms can do a lot better, but we have to realise it has to start somewhere. And that is educating everybody, young people, parents, carers, adults. Yeah. Because at the end of the day as well, adults, from what I've seen, they're the main protagonists of all of this content. At the end of the day, somebody has to post content, make that content, add a comment to a post. It might be abusive or something like that. It's a user that does that. I've not seen that auto-generated anywhere. Someone has to do it at the very beginning. So that is a user, and that is young people and adults as well. So we have to educate at the very, very beginning, and as well as trying to fix the rest of it as well. It seems quite easy. I don't know why we haven't done it yet.
Well, we've got all the answers, and they should just listen to us. I just think, we can do better. And I think parents are really scared for their kids and scared for the future in a lot of cases. I personally think, like I've said multiple times, where you can educate, where you can supervise, where you can create boundaries in place, it does have a massive impact. So dangerous content can have a massive impact. So Andy, if you were to leave any other resources or like websites or something that you go, nah, this is something to check out for a parent, is there anything that you can recommend?
Crikey, well, to be honest, there's a vast array of stuff.
I've thrown that at
Honestly,
you and it's like so much.
well, I have a list and it's 400 odd lines long. So yeah, exactly. And that's a global thing. And it's really interesting, actually, because it really covers a whole breadth. It's everything from child safety smartphones to board games for child safety to websites that produce a lot of stuff. Certainly for Australia, you've got a net e-safety commissioner, you've got NetSafe, you've got people like yourself. There's a vast array. I could keep going on and on and on, and I know a lot of people over there. And I could name ones over here in America as well. The one thing I would say is, for anybody who is listening, certainly reach out to Kristi. I'm more than happy if people want to seek me out. More than happy. As I say, reach out, ask advice. For whatever it is. That sounds really interesting. Could you tell me a bit more about that? The one thing I would say to parents and adults as well is if you do want a bit more further information, firstly, push your kids' school. If they're not doing it, make them do it.
It should.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a legal requirement. It is over here, but
It's
make sure.
Schools can choose
Oh,
whether
right.
but I think it's in the curriculum. Like they do some,
Yeah.
like teachers teach the curriculum, so there is some curriculum around
But again,
it, but it's not always adequate.
well, again, interestingly enough, ask who does it. If you go to your school, just say who does your training, because I've seen it here where it's a little bit uncoordinated. I've heard that history teachers or the maths teachers might give it.
Yeah, same.
So ask who's going to do it. What do that school
they're not
have in
experts,
place?
are they? They're not experts
They're not,
in that
and
area.
all due respect to them, they're doing their best. I just like to point out. Also, if you do want to seek advice, one thing I'm going to say is, if you do want to seek advice from external people, just check their backgrounds. And I'm not suggesting anybody's dubious, but it's always best to have a look at those people. What have they done before? Both you and I have been ex-law enforcement. We've been there, seen it, done it. I know of other people who have done that as well. I don't want to sound disrespectful to some people, but we have the knowledge. There's a lot of people who are doing the talks, doing the education, who might not have either spent many years doing it or have not worked in that environment. Great. I applaud them for doing it, but I would say to parents, just make sure you know, because there's an awful lot of misinformation out there. And some people will ram down the throat, such as like, do not let your kids on Snapchat, do not let them on TikTok, it's full of paedophiles. Well, where are you basing that information on? So look at, if you do want further talks or you do want further information, just don't just Google and go online safety expert. You'll get a myriad of people. Look for people with the background who've been in this for years and years, because we know,
Well, yeah,
so,
and we're probably going to have a little bit more of an all-round opinion on it. Like, we're not going to, like you said, be all negative. We're going to have we're going to have, obviously, we're going to have reasons why we believe what we believe. We're going to say, look, this is a bit tricky, but this is, you can mitigate this or reduce that harm by doing X, Y, Z. Or,
well, as we said at the very beginning, social media is good. It's there for the right reasons. It's like anything, where there's good, there's going to be bad. And that's the same in society. So, I am pro social media. I use it. We met on LinkedIn. Fact, so I'm not going to be all anti, whereas some people might be. We're going to take a very balanced, unbiased view. We're going to tell you how it is. We're going to tell you it's not as easy as you think it is. Yeah. So we'll tell you the facts. At the end of the day, as a parent, we cannot tell you how to parent your child. You know your child. You know their characteristics. You know their mannerisms. Some parents, let's be fair, don't really give a hoot. Right?
Yeah, I know. I was about to say that.
Yeah, some parents
give a lot
are a bit more proactive. Yeah. So, and we have to realise that's life as well. So we're not going to win them all. And again, we accept that. We know that we could ram the same message down teenagers' throats about don't do this, don't talk to strangers, don't do this. We know teenagers are going to do it. That's life as well. some kids will just switch off. Some will pay attention. Some will want to learn more. So again, that's life, and we have to accept that. So it's all about keeping the awareness up, keeping the education up. As I say, as you mentioned, if people want to know what's out there, reach out, ask, whether it's a board game or watch, or where can I go for resources? And trust me, there's more than enough webinars and seminars if you want to see something about a particular topic.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's so much to learn here, and we're in Australia. We've got the eSafety Commissioner. They've got like fact sheets and guides, and you can look it up there. Common Sense Media is a good one.
Yes.
For real life information like parent reviews, child reviews, children reviews, and I'm thinking that what else? And obviously, Andy knows a lot about this stuff because you've been doing it a long time, Andy.
Far too long, and it.
What are you doing now, by the way?
I'm sure. Well, it's funny actually. I sit in this funny old part of the landscape. So I will go into schools and do education, schools and adults. I will work with charities. I work, funnily enough, with law enforcement. I work with platforms, big and small. I work with NGOs, all sorts of different things. For instance, I've worked with platforms. Now we've got the new acts in place. Okay, the Online Safety Act and the Internet Safety Act over there. Platforms are being told, you must do this, you must have this in place. And they're very much going, right, but what exactly, how do we do that? So, I've helped platforms look at their policies. I've trained staff. How to spot CSEA, how to spot terminology. One of the things I've done in the past is user behavior analysis, looking at those patterns, looking at those trends. So I've done that. I work with law enforcement and others to look at the highest level risks out there. When we talk of the worst, there's a huge amount of organized chaos, for want of a better word, out there. And I help them to maybe find out what's going on, the patterns, the trends, how people are chatting, what they're talking about. I actually help as a coordinator, so I'll hear that, funnily enough, some law enforcement in Australia are doing something, but I've heard that also law enforcement in America are doing the same thing. Right. I put them in touch, and they're both like, yeah, it's like, we didn't know that. But stuff like that, help law enforcement. Law enforcement, yes, as you say, you've got the Argus team over there, we have teams over here, but sometimes it falls down to individual teams and individual police staff, and they're like, I've got this, don't know what to do with it.
I don't know what to do.
Or it can be like, we're not getting this information from such and such a platform. It's annoying. We need this for investigation. Why are we getting knocked back? So I'll speak to them and say, well, let's have a look at it. Oh, if you reword it in this way, it might help.
Yeah, right.
Things like that. As I say, going to schools, working charities, intelligence research, as I say, hearing the more higher level conversations going on. How criminals are
Sounds like you got your fingers in every pie.
And also, the other part of that is what's called trust and safety. I'll just touch on this briefly. Trust and safety is the term given to predominantly social media, but more platforms. And they are the teams that do all this work. And they can be outsourced companies that deal with content moderation, which is a tough old job, tell you that. They can be the internal teams at a wide variety of platforms. They're the ones who have to design the policies. They're the people who design the tech, the legal teams, the operational teams. And that is a very complicated and challenging job right across. We hear, certainly in America, Australia, safety by design. It's a big talk at the moment. But yeah, the product people who are doing this are now having to think, right, safety by design. They have tech backgrounds predominantly. They don't have like the backgrounds you and I have. So
policy, safety, law enforcement. What's illegal? What's not illegal?
Yeah, so it's talking to them, and they'll say, well, hang on, we can't do that, or we can do that, but if we do that, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And that's for the biggest to the smallest platform. And so there's all of this that falls under trust and safety. And when we talk about trust and safety, in fact, it's bigger than platforms. So
yeah,
funnily enough, the banking institutions, they fall under this now because a lot of payments for certain things, whether it's fraud or scams or
It's
blackmail
online.
or it goes through the financial systems, whatever they might be. We have online abuse in sport. So that impacts all the sports that are out there. These individual players, whether they're grassroots or professional or referees or players, the amount of abuse. We look at the music industry as well. We've got copyright. We've got deep fake stuff now. Well, not now.
Yeah,
It's been
wow.
going on for a while. So the music and the film industry and the TV industry, they're all affected by all of this as well. So it's a
Wow.
huge, massive landscape that we have to try to figure out. And just actually, I will just touch on this, that going back to parents and young people, basically one of the most important things, don't believe everything you see on the
internet. I say that to my daughter all the time. Where'd you hear that from?
Yeah.
If it's from TikTok, go and do your research.
Well, I'd say if it's from anywhere, go and do your research. Yeah, don't believe.
I say that as well.
Everything. And even when I say that, and I'm not just talking about news or you see a celebrity endorsing something, it's even like I've seen it over here. People will post a picture and say, check out my new car. And people go, well, how do you afford that? And there's this what we call keeping up with the Joneses. Well, if they've got a new car, I think we should go and change our car. That could be a rental car, or that could be they've just passed a showroom. Yeah, or they've just walked past it. It really is as simple as that. Don't believe everything you see, and kids are the same. Check out my new jacket, latest jacket. Look at, they're probably in the shop and just tried it on, to be honest with you. Or if
I talk about that with my teen all the time.
Yeah, if one of their friends has gone, I've got this latest jacket, this was $900 jacket, and then the child comes home to the parent, oh, whinge. It probably isn't. It's probably either a knockoff or it probably only costs about $200 or something. Don't believe everything,
everything.
And that goes for adults and that goes for young people as well, that it's so easy to manipulate. It's so easy to seem convincing. Influencers, don't believe everything the influencers are saying,
Yeah.
That's another
and our
thing.
young people are very influenced, like they are a very influenced generation, and we are too.
Yeah,
I mean, I say
absolutely.
to my husband says the same thing. He's like, they've got all of these new things. Why can't we afford these new things? And I'm like, mate, are they really theirs? Like, stop stressing.
Prove it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but secondary to that, like I have the conversation with my daughter. She'll say, "Did you know such and such?" Like she'll hear something on TikTok or something or wherever she's heard it, and I'll say, "Where did you hear that? Have you done your homework?" Like, don't just trust. I think one of the stats she came up with is like, you've walked past about 3 murderers in your lifetime or something like that, or you've or one of those weird stats. And I was like, okay, that sounds a bit, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's not true, but have you actually looked this up? Like, where's this research come from? Like, if they're not quoting where the source was from, like, I don't trust any of that. So, just having those conversations.
Yeah, in fact, I can't remember the exact figure, but this was going back a few years and it's probably changed and there's probably something. There was something like that said 1 in 8 people or 1 in 6 people has an interest in children, sexual interest in
Australia.
children.
It was an Australian study.
Yeah, and I was working in law enforcement at the time in a dedicated CSEA online team. And there were, I think, about 35 of us there. And we were like, right, so if there's 1 in 6... and there's 35 of us here, and it's the same. Like, it would have been the same over there. It's like, so how many of us is there?
There's a few
and everyone's
of us
like,
who are interested.
So what? How can you work that out in theory? And I'm not saying that wasn't based on research, but doesn't quite add up to me. And as I say, don't believe everything. We've seen influencers from all sorts. There was a recent one on, I think it was Netflix, about a young female who did a thing about cancer, didn't she? It was about
Belle Gibson.
That's it. I knew it was Belle something. I couldn't remember. Again, and she's not the first. In fact, there was another one last week. So again, these influencers, these celebrities, whoever, or The best one I try and tell young people is, if something's too good to be true, like buy these new trainers at dirt cheap price, or we had a big one with Taylor Swift tickets. Get your Taylor Swift tickets, half price,
Same.
VIP access. If it's too good to be true, guarantee it probably is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was a good place to like finish the chat, because we could be talking forever, because we love talking about this stuff. And we said that at the very beginning, we could talk about this forever and ever and ever. So Andy, if I know that you've got like that list of 400 plus things on
I'll share
on
it
everything.
with you. I'll share it with you.
Are you sure? You're happy to?
Yeah. It's all open. It's all public access. It's just all in one place, so it's fine.
What I'll do is I'll share the link in the show notes. So that would be amazing. And Andy is located on LinkedIn. Works all over got his hands in every pie in regards to this space. I think you must be working your butt off. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat with me and to just talk about, the fact is it's not going away. We need to adapt. We need to make it easier for ourselves, but also, give our children the best opportunities, which is us being their best education. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come and talk with you, especially, as I say, other side of the world. We've got to love technology. Yeah, I think my ending thing is, like, we've talked a lot about negatives here, but there's also a lot of positives. Tech's here to stay. Let's embrace it. It's going to advance. We know this. It's not all fearful, and again, if things go wrong, you're not alone. Reach out, to all these people and resources that are out there. But embrace it.
Thank you.
We're here doing tech, everything.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And I'll share everything in the show notes. So thank you for being on Conversations with Kristi. It was a good conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Education empowers children, strengthens parents, and most importantly, prevents abuse. That's why I do this work, and that's why you're here. So truly, thank you. If you'd like more support or resources, follow me on social media under Kristi McVie or Cape-AU, where you'll find all the links in the show notes. You can also grab a copy of my book, Operation KidSafe, A Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention, at www.cape-au.com, where you'll find further resources and self-paced courses to help you in this journey of protecting your kids. If you found this episode valuable, please take a moment to leave a review or share it with someone important. Your support helps more parents and caregivers discover this important information and take action to keep kids safe. Check the show notes for extra links and support, and most importantly, thank you for showing up and taking action to protect your kids. See you next time.